Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Motorsport Experience podcast. This is a podcast for enthusiasts of all kinds of motorsports, and it's designed to inspire and bring forth stories of those who have experiences in motorsport so that we can share those stories among each other and spread the word of how awesome this is. And on this episode, I have a guest, Lauren, and I let her introduce herself. And she's a pretty interesting individual. She actually flies a helicopter. So helicopter has a motor, therefore it fits within the description of my podcast. So we're going to explore what it's like to operate the machine as opposed to on the ground, in the air. So Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. I'm so happy to be here with you. This is a very cool idea. So actually, flow state is what drew me to dive into the helicopter industry. And I mean, the dream started when I was about 3 years old. And then in high school, somebody told me that it cost $75,000 to become a helicopter pilot. So I thought, well, that's out of the picture. And I just did the normal thing and went to university. And then from there, I went to law school to, try to have a secure profession. And it worked out. I became a criminal prosecutor, and that was fun and, exciting. But always there was something that I had something was calling me. And I was very much into athletics and even downhill mountain biking and surfing and things like that are very flow state oriented. Also into meditation and looking for that flow state, but I didn't find it in the courtroom. Maybe at first, but not over the years. The analytical mind was ever present in that industry. So I decided when I was about 35 years old that it was now or never. And I just saw a helicopter one day flying over the highway. And I was like, that's it. That's what I've been missing, I wonder if I can really do that. And I knew that it would take all that I had and the best of me to be able to, pivot and go and learn how to fly a helicopter. I actually didn't know how hard it was going to be. I'm not sure if you know, but flying and hovering is extremely difficult. And in fact, I would say I've ridden bikes, like being a passenger in a motorcycle, and I feel an amazing flow state that comes even as a passenger. And I love it. And yes, that is achieved when you run a river or do like kind of rhythmic flying. And in certain maneuvers can garner that. But the actual hovering and the flying and taking off and landing is a little bit of a different flow state. I think it's like just really heavy on the presence and on the stillness, really.
Wow, this is fascinating. And you dove straight into the flow state, which I usually leave for like middle of the conversations because usually people don't know about it much. So I need to like really explain and weave it in and kind of find examples in the people's words, but you went straight in, which makes it so much easier because the reason I'm doing the underlying reason why I'm doing this podcast is because there's huge amount of flow state in motorsports. There is a feedback from the machine, there's feedback from the body, there's risk, there's all kinds of things happen. And so it's interesting that you actually noticed and went for it. And so it's also interesting to say that you have different perception of various variations of flow state. So what if we dove into that aspect, what is the difference that you see in flow states across different activities?
Well, I mean, I'm no expert, but I can tell you my experience. And what I find is there's a very, I would say, blissful, motion oriented, like speed oriented kind of. It doesn't have to be like outrageous speed, but when the visual like perception or plane the plane of reference is rushing towards you and past you, and you're kind of streamlining it like that, I find that there's a certain like beautiful state that can be cultivated and is almost naturally arising when you're in that. And of course, like when there is, if you're flying in a canyon or something, that would be like boom, because you've got, I mean, yeah, it can be a very smooth experience in a helicopter. But a helicopter is basically a pendulum floating and swinging beneath the disc. The disc is what's flying, like the rotor blades above you. So you're hanging, and as you turn, you can kind of feel that at times. So that adds a different kind of aspect that would be interesting to explore. I haven't done enough kind of technical flying in mountains or things like that to know. But for me, what turned out to be the most relevant sort of state of consciousness, I guess, was just this stillness and presence, and basically feeling like the disc above me. Because as you pick up the helicopter, you have to be able to sense like whether you're hanging directly below it or not. If you're off to the side, then the helicopter is going to go in that direction. So taking off at like the hangar or the apron, as it's called, where there's other aircraft, there may be fuel vehicles. I mean, you've got to really like be 100% there. And you can't have anything other than what's going on and your sensations of that and your physiology of like where everything is and what's happening, and your hands and feet. You use your feet to fly as well. So all of that works together. And as you start to develop that and get into that state to be able to pick up the helicopter, and within a split second whether you're going to have a good day or just an okay day or a great day. So it's not the rushing of like speed and movement past you. It's this just really sharp, alert presence that you have to be able to cultivate. And for me, that was a very welcome challenge.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, and you are so right when you mentioned that in courtroom there is not much flow because there's so much analytical thinking. Our analytical thinking actually takes us out of the flow, because when we're processing and analyzing, we're all up in the head, and flow exists more in the body. It exists kind of in reflexes and reactions. And one of the things that I wonder about is when I'm riding a motorcycle on the street, I have a helmet which allows me great field of vision. The visor is huge, so I see a lot of sky in front of me, and that helps with the experience, because when we see open areas, it inspires awe in us, especially if those areas are very beautiful. And I assume when you fly in a helicopter and you can see things from above, it only adds to that feeling of awe. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And whenever I'm not flying, I'm missing that open vista. Just, it's like, wow, like, whew, so much space. Yeah. I 100% think that for me, it was a journey of reclaiming my nervous system and then being able to demonstrate that to myself with a beautiful flight. And I did that. I took, a lot of, for me, it took practices that I was cultivating and certain habits, and also just learning how to fly and being around other pilots. Also, I was picking up on their state of alignment. I guess the latent flow, because they're present, but if they're not flying, it's not like highly pronounced. But yeah, I definitely at the beginning was still very much in my head and struggled for quite a while with that. And as I started to move past that, everything kind of clicked into place. And yeah, and I could tell like absolutely just being able to see the vast distances was healing for my body. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And what you mentioned is this beginning period is the struggle phase where you're learning the skill, where you're acquiring, where you're learning how to take off, which you describe as being difficult. It exists within every flow state. That struggle, it's required. That's when we onboard the new information. And so how long was the period of time that it took you to really learn how to do that until it became second nature?
Oh, it was, I think for me, it was about 30 hours of flying, which some, like the young boys who were coming out of high school and 18, 19 that were in my course, and many of them also were dirt bike riders and other motorsport like established in that. They picked it up within 15, 20 hours. So it was difficult to watch that, which prolonged even further my kind of coming into the zone. But once I was there, I actually was more established than they were, which was very interesting. Just, I don't know if it was maturity or like, who knows? There's so many factors. But another thing that I found was very interesting is that I started to really tap in. I was then able to find that flow state and have that glossy takeoff, every day for a week, or it was probably 2 weeks. And then unbeknownst to me, the group of instructors were starting to, single me out for the next solo, because they have to send you solo. And that's a big deal. They've trained you, you've been flying well, but they're about to get out and let you take off. And then once you're taking off, how are you going to land if you don't know? Right? And nobody knows how you're going to react to that. So what I found was super interesting is it was as if the focus of these, I'm going to say 5 to 7 very, very professional and established, including like at the higher end of the hierarchy within the company, like expert helicopter pilots. It seemed as though their combined focus on me or any student that was going solo, but for me, my experience, their combined focus on me seemed to almost telepathically keep me in place. And like, I would swear my life on this, like that was my experience, is their combined focus was assisting my consciousness in having that focus and alignment to be able to take off, hover. Because as you're hovering, I mean, your right hand has to be 100% still and stable. And it's a very sensitive, like 360-degree gyroscopic control that you're holding. It's got to be still. And then you're talking to the radio tower, and then you're slowly pressing it forward to drop the nose and start to pick up some ground speed. I mean, you're not on the ground, but you're picking up the speed relative to the ground. And then you start to lift off once you hit about 50 or 60 knots. And then there's a nice feeling of like levity as you start to, you sense the speed. And then as you start to lift the nose up, all of a sudden you're weightless and you're just taking off into the sky. Yeah. And you start to become so familiar with the hand and feet movements that you don't really need to reference the instruments, but you can see on your altimeter when you get to about 500 or 600 feet above ground, then that's when you start to level out, and then you start your right hand turn. And the first maneuver is you just do a very simple circuit, and you just come back into the exact direction that you have taken off. So you take off, you make a right hand turn, and you're drawing a box. You make another right hand turn, you make another right hand turn, and then you call final. I'm final for runway 08. And then they say, okay, you're final for runway 08. Then you start to land, and landing is very graceful, especially at the end, you want it to be. But yeah, I remember my first landing was like the best achievement ever. I couldn't believe it. Blew my own mind. Yeah.
Wow, that is that is absolutely mind-blowing. And the fact that you have perceived this telepathic connection, because I
Absolutely.
completely believe that we are not just these physical bodies. We have
Mm,
consciousness that connects us to each other. We just can't see that. But it's totally, totally plausible that all of the people who were involved in that adventure, in that event at that moment, were synced up on some level. And flow has a lot to do with it. There's a group flow, there's a flow of consciousness that happens when we are together doing something. And when there's so much attention focused on one thing, it's inevitable that it's going to merge and
yeah.
something else is going to come out, because the physicality is just, it's an illusion in many ways. So it almost makes me think of all those science fiction occurrences where the aircraft flies by the mind alone, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, totally. And the one thing I want to say is after about 2 weeks, once I went solo, then it was, the next phase is you do circuits at the airport. So you're no longer going out and learning like this or that, or sometimes in the beginning, you're just flying over to the neighboring town just because you need something to do while you get used to the hands and feet controls. So once you've gone solo, then you have this phase where you're like doing circuits at the airport until you never want to do another circuit at the airport again because you're so bored. So you're like in the circuits at the airport phase. And it's funny. Like at first you're so excited about it, and then you're like, oh my God, another circuit. But anyway, so uh after about 2 weeks of, you don't fly every day because of weather. So maybe 6 flights, but that's about 2 working weeks. Um, then I started noticing that I wasn't as magical anymore on some of my takeoffs. And I would take off and then I would have to like recorrect. I wouldn't have taken off into that perfect sweet spot. I would take off and then I would be like, oh, I'm moving to the left and I need to correct. Just a split second, nothing big, no big deal. But it didn't have that magical feeling. And I correlated that with they aren't focusing on me anymore. They're not worried about me. I don't have all the attention of the company. So now I'm kind of on my own. Like nobody's paying attention to me and my flying anymore. And this is making it less. I just had less energy available in the field. I had to channel all of it for myself.
Well, that is so interesting, because totally we do
Yeah.
receive energy through attention.
Yeah.
And so that makes me wonder, how did you started finding your own kind of sources for that, after that time has passed?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, for me, I used to have this little mantra and then I didn't need it anymore, but it was, I always fly from my ninth chakra. So like way up above, and I would just focus. Because I mean, at the beginning, it was like serious. I mean, it was truly life and death. Like I was more worried about like not creating a scene, but I mean, it was a big deal. So I would just really channel all of my consciousness to basically where the rotor disc is and just try to be like fully connected there. And I mean, how did I do it? I had a daily energy routine in the morning that I would do. I lived a very simple life. Like it was just flying. I had put aside my savings, sold my house, things like that to really, I had nothing to worry about. And I already lived a pretty meditative life. I did long distance running. So those things just all helped. But I also remember somebody who I respected a lot said to me, it's sometimes on the most chaotic of days that you fly the best because so nobody really knows. But I started to just trust myself. And it was never as magical as the very beginning, but there were days where it felt like flow from start to finish. And then there were days that it felt a little more mechanical, but
Wow, I love that part of flying from the ninth chakra. That is so absolutely so magical in itself.
mhm.
And so I've heard a lot that in the flight training, a lot of people quit in the middle because it becomes so difficult. And you explain how the beginning was so difficult mentally, and comparison also made it harder. What kept you going?
Well, just the dream. Like I wasn't gonna stop until I got there. I just I guess it's partially my personality. That's a really good question. I believed in myself and I wanted it badly enough. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's that's the only real reason that we kind of do anything, is because we believe in something. And
Mhm.
if the belief is lacking, that's usually where the doubts come in, and that's usually where people quit. But it's good to know. So now when you fly, how does it feels now after you have established your routine?
Yeah, and I actually just want to add one more thing because it was such a good question. What kept me going is, for me, it was, I said it was the dream, but what the dream was the representation of flow. So it was like I felt that there's no reason I can't get to that state of flow. That's what means the most to me in the universe, because there lies beauty, lies truth, lies, you know, simplicity, grace. All these things were associated with that oneness of I'm at one with the machine, with the wind, with the moment. And that was what I was all about. There was nothing more important to me in life. And so until the helicopter no longer represented that, which never happened, but that would have been the only possible thing that could have knocked me off the path. And I also did an amazing brain training thing that helped with dopamine and things like that, which was a whole other side of things. But now when I fly, well, it's interesting. What happened was, once I got my license, then it's a really big, the next phase is that you have to try and find your first job as a low time pilot. You're just a massive liability. So nobody really wants to pay you if they can hire someone who has even 200 hours. Because when you get your license, you only have like 100 to maybe 150 hours at the most. So I decided to go back to the law just to have an income because I got an offer. So I was open to anything, but the first offer that came in was back prosecuting criminal cases. So I did that. But the whole time I was just like looking for helicopter jobs. And my boss knew and she supported me and everything. But they're like, we want you to get the job, but we hope you don't because we need you here. Right. And every day I was like, I can feel it draining out of me. I can feel like I'm losing flow. And like, I mean, I'm not like obsessed or anything. I was still very present. But the difference between reading a file and having to present an argument is like night and day to like getting in an aircraft and being like at one, right? So where I'm going with this is I ended up getting an offer, but in order to get that job, I needed to do my night rating. So I went back to my flight school. I was working as a lawyer during the day, and then at night I was flying. And at first, it was like didn't know you haven't how to fly anymore. Like it was so bad. They were like, "What happened to you?" And I'm like, "I don't know. The law ruined me. I don't know what's gonna happen." And then the craziest thing happened. So I listened to Eckhart Tolle quite a lot. He's a spiritual guy, and he gives guided meditations that are more just like he's talking, but he's in a state of presence while he's talking. And so you can pick that up and tap into it. So I would always do that. While I was doing my helicopter night rating in North Bay, I got an offer to go live with Eckhart Tolle. So I did. And that was right in the middle of my night rating. After doing that, the next day, it was like, boom. I was like back with a vengeance. It was amazing. They were like, and it was funny because I was actually feeling stiff in my body with all like I wasn't able to run because of all the, I had driven to North Bay. I was doing my cases. I was, there's a lot going on. And I was like, oh, I'm really stiff today. But I had done the Eckhart Tolle live the night before. And then I just flew like a master. And my the chief pilot was like, if this is you stiff, no more yoga for you.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
so incredible. I do like Eckhart Tolle and his books, and the fact that that experience helped you fly. It's like another confirmation that
Yeah.
what's happens in our consciousness affects our reality, affects how we perform, affects what we do. Just so interesting how all these pieces
Yeah.
fit together in this tapestry of experience. And I wanted to ask, how did you originally came to know what flow state even was? How did you came up with to know the terminology and what you were looking for? Because you were looking for specific things. So how did you discover it originally?
Hmm. I think I was just drawn to it naturally. Like, I think it probably was through a surfing portal of some kind, like way back in the day. Um, I think we're all drawn to it. Like, the reason we want to watch pro sports is because we want to see them go beyond the mind. We want to see them do things that just shouldn't happen, but do when there's all that energy focused on the flow of the game. Like we want to feel that emergent energy. And so yeah, I looked for it in like the side projects of my life until it became too important for me. Just because we only live once, or at least it seems that way for now. and I just I valued my felt sense of my life more than the picture of it. So I had achieved the perfect picture of my life and I felt not good in my body. So I decided to flip it on its head and be like, I don't care what my life looks like, but I know how I want to feel.
That is completely true. We are all predisposed towards that experience, that
Yeah.
flowy way of experiencing things, and everybody wants it, but not many people know the terminology, not many people know how to explain it. And what happens when you find the terms is that it helps you to understand how to identify your individual flow state, how to seek it better, and how to maintain it more. Because as we experience, we can have the highs that too high and lows that become too low. Have you experienced anything like that when the flow is just so flowy, you're almost euphoric, and then the next day the drop becomes huge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that was happening after that going solo moment. There was definitely a period of feeling like I had lost something that I had had during that time. But then it just became intermittent. So it never really was lost. And certainly in my night rating. So what I think actually is that it just continues to grow. It's just not a linear thing. So at first I had this fear of losing it, but then I started to notice that it would be there and then it wouldn't. So it wasn't a big deal. I just needed to be okay with it. That some days you're just going to fly like it's your job. And then other days you're going to fly like second nature, right? Like, but one of the things that really, like on my flight test that day, would have been a good day to be in flow. And I was. So it was perfect. It was amazing. And the universe was on my side too. There were lots of things that happened that really helped. But in terms of like, getting that back, and it was only at the night rating and after sitting with Eckhart Tolle that I really regained like the full magnitude of the feeling of my first solo flight. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And so one of the things that happens is that sometimes we need a little bit of adjustment in the risk factor in order to kind of bump ourselves back to that level. And I think when you started flying at night, the challenge got increased. And so you were more kind of, it became a little harder because the challenge increased. When the challenge increases, we can get bumped out of flow until we regain that skill level as well. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I was thinking about when you were talking about how I lost my train of thought. um, what
I
was
have
I?
other things to say as well. So if you want to just remember
Okay,
it in a
sure.
minute.
We'll come
Okay.
back to that.
Okay. Because so one of the things that your comment about the risk level is really on point. And as I'm listening to you talk, I realize you're making a lot of really good points that I never thought about. because what happened was I thought I knew that there is a flow state and I just need to get into it. But it's actually there's some nuances. So you're talking about this, and I only can say that because there were moments throughout the journey that, and I'm sure that they will continue, that I would sort of be humbled that, okay, wait, no, I don't know. For example, when I thought, oh, I'm really stiff today, but actually I flew better than ever. So it was like realizing that I don't always know what is going to cultivate or welcome that state. And then the other thing is that during my night rating, not only was I flying at night, but I was also flying with probably the pilot that I respect the most on the planet. And I had at first been intimidated to fly with this person because I just thought either my putting that person on a pedestal will affect my ability to actually perform. So I don't know how to cross that bridge or get over that issue. And also just didn't feel good enough. But then it was necessary for the night rating that I fly with this person. So I had to just go, okay, well, I'm going to show up. And I had this attitude of like, well, it'll be there or it won't. There's no more woo woo stuff that I can do at this point. I need to show up with my feet, maybe have a coffee, which I didn't, like it was the night, but like just keep it simple and show up and just do your best. Just go all in. And it worked. And not only that, but we also were practicing a hydraulic failure, which is like my worst. Everybody's got something that they just aren't that good at. And the hydraulics are for me. That's where I'm not the best. So,
And what does it mean exactly, the hydraulics failure?
So it's an emergency procedure where you simulate the loss of hydraulics. So you turn the hydraulics off to pretend that they've failed. And what that means is that it's like having power steering in a vehicle or not. You've lost the assistance of that hydraulic fluid on the controls. So every movement of the disc that you are doing, you have to do with your muscle alone. And the other thing about it is that there's a delay, there's a lag time. So you have to coordinate your movements in a different fashion than when you're flying with the hydraulics on. And I'm just really bad at it and I get scared. I start to worry because what happens is you have to land, you do a run on landing. Normally in a helicopter, you land directly straight down. But if you don't have hydraulics, you have to land while you're moving forward and skid to a halt. So you've got to coordinate the moving, like the ground rushing towards you and your forward movement. And if you try to slow the helicopter down, then you're going to throw your rate of descent out of whack. So you've got to just trust your speed and let it go. And I remember doing this, and the guy who I said I respect and admire so much was yelling at me, like almost for dear life, like, you got to do something, Lauren, what are you going to do right now? And like, I'm not even doing half of what he was doing. Like, he was truly freaking yelling, and it worked so well. It just snapped me right into, and it's like, I never would have thought that I needed someone to be yelling at me and for like a situation to actually be real. For me, it would be like, no, I need the training wheels on. I need you to be kind, tell me what to do. We need to do it in a safe environment. And then that won't upset my flow, right? No, I needed to be in the pressure cooker with everything going wrong and the ground coming quick. And like, I did it. So it's really interesting to like realize that I don't have a handle on how to cause that flow state to emerge necessarily. So in motorsports, I guess, you just need to kind of either be open or trust those who have gone before you.
Yeah, it's very relevant because sometimes extra challenge increases the focus, and then when the focus increases, then we can perform better. So it totally makes sense. And I would, of all the motorsports type of vehicles that I have been exposed to, this sounds like the most difficult to learn to maneuver because there's so much flexibility in the movement that even the bikes don't have that. I don't know. But one of the things that comes to mind is that often hear about flow state in association with productivity. When you're in flow, you can focus better, therefore you can be more productive. It's true to some extent, but from your story, what I'm hearing, and from other things that I know, is that what's more important is alignment to the goal, alignment to the practice, and why we are doing the certain flow state. So for you, there was alignment with that goal and desire to do that. You weren't doing learning to fly a helicopter so you can get another job and get more money paid. You were doing it for the joy of doing it. And that kind of alignment is critical for the best flow state to emerge, because we can get ourselves trained in all these tips and tricks and hacks of how to hack the flow state, but without that inner alignment with that desire to do it intrinsically, it's called intrinsic motivation, because we're doing something for the joy of doing it, for its own sake. Without that, it's much more difficult to consistently get in flow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one thing that came through for me when you were saying that is, my ideas of what was going to work at the beginning, many of them had to be discarded. Like, I remember not wanting to hang around at the hangar because I found like the kids were distracting or whatever. And I wanted to go and try and stay in my meditative state in my truck and wait until it was my turn to fly. But that, wasn't in accordance with the culture at the school. So I started to have to abandon that and just put up with being at the hangar. And it turned out that actually like the shared space of the hangar was actually very conducive to, just snapping into the flow when it was your turn to go up. So
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. The culture and the community does play a part, because we're social creatures. So whenever we're trying to access flow state, the group flow plays a role, and our connections with other members of the community are just as important. We are never really alone in this world. No matter how we feel isolated, we're still connected to others. And the more we kind of accept it and embrace it, the better our psychology and physiology and nervous system works, because when we were with other people, the nervous system relaxes a little bit. And so in closing, sort of tell us where you are now with this. Are you flying regular gigs? Are you getting hired more often as a pilot? How has it progressed for you since then?
So the day that I got hired for my first job after the night rating was the day that the vaccine mandate came in for pilots. So just, the fact of the matter is that I didn't have the vaccine for COVID, and I had been living in isolation, mostly in the wilderness, doing my pilot's license. And then when I was back in court, it was in the north where, I wasn't seeing anyone and we were virtual. So there was no like risk for anyone else or me. My health is like, I call it radical health. I have very, very strong health, and I've been exposed many times and I've never gotten COVID, but I didn't have the vaccine. So it ended up falling through. And so I made a plan this June to go down to the States because I'm a dual citizen. And I was going to go down and do some mountain courses and fly near relatives' ranch in Colorado. But then I ended up getting into breath work. So it's kind of unrelated to helicopters at the moment, but breath work for somatic relating and helping people in the professional world that I came from to basically be in a better state in their nervous system, not so dysregulated. And the idea is that if I can do this thing that I am passionate about, which is the breath work, and help other professionals with that, then it will also provide me with the flexibility to take helicopter opportunities as they come up, because now we don't have the requirements anymore in Canada for pilots to be vaccinated. So that's the truth about where I'm at with flying, but I don't know if it's all that relevant or helpful.
No, it is relevant, because what it shows is that sometimes we go after a dream and we do everything right, everything the way we're supposed to, and we still get obstacles thrown in our way. But that's not the reason to stop doing something that we strongly believe in. It only means that universe is giving us another opportunity to do something else in a different way. And everything later comes together in a perfect way. We can't really expect to see the line forward straight. It's never straight. It's always curvy. There are always curveballs and turns in a river of life. So it's important to realize that there might be times when you won't be able to do the thing that you enjoy the most. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to do that. It just means there is a turn right now where you need to divert your attention to something else that later will add to the main thing, which in your case seems like a perfect combination of everything. And also alignment with our values and our beliefs. If it is not within our beliefs to do something, then we should not be feel pressured to do it. That is so critical for me, that I want to really emphasize it. It's knowing yourself and knowing what you believe, and then following that belief, no matter what consequences it has, because when we sacrifice the belief in ourselves, we sacrifice a lot. So it sounds like you're in the perfect place right now. And as the world is changing, as we are evolving, there will be more and more opportunities for growth and for whatever it is that we're following through. And so what would be your message to anybody who is maybe interested in flow or interested in evolution of self, like in general or specific? What would you want to impart into the world?
Well, it was the best thing I ever did, was to put my flow first. Yeah. And so I did whatever I had to do to be able to do that. There were lots of sacrifices and choices to make, but I would never do it different. It was the best thing that I ever did. And now I realize that I want to carry that flow as much as I can into every area of my life. And I am doing that. And that's breath work is, it's an amazing way to co-regulate nervous systems with others and to really leave people in a state of flow is the goal. It doesn't happen every single session. Sometimes, there needs to be some integration and then it'll come a few days later. But yeah, I live my life now based on, the respect for flow and the prioritization of things that enable that. But at the same time, I also am open to, days that are off days and things like that. So I think it's a balance. I think that, flow is one of the magical things that makes life worth living, but it's not something that, that I expect to be in every single second of every day. I also accept my humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't be in flow state 24/7. It's pockets of time that it's window of opportunities into that space of potentiality. So there are windows here and there, which we can increase the frequency of, but we can't have them consistently. So that's definitely not something that anybody should be striving to have. And are you anywhere where people can find more about you?
Yeah, I have a website called breathworkforprofessionals.com. So if anybody's interested in tapping into their flow through that modality, then that is 100% available. I'm actually offering free sessions until September 15th, 2022. So breathworkforprofessionals.com. And then I'm on socials as well, but you can access those through the website. And beyond that, I'm looking forward to getting into motorcycling someday and hopefully learning from you in that regard. But it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes. And I will put the links in the description below. And it was so wonderful to hear your experience. It's truly amazing. The aspects that you described, I hope the listeners got a lot of value from your experiential description of the flow state and flying and how it all fits together. And what most importantly is how it makes us better people when we access more flow. And so if anybody is out there wanting to experience more flow, first you can search up the word, and the term is being discussed a lot more frequently now. but also you can continue listening to these podcasts where I try to explain flow in different ways. So in order to open the possibilities and open the perception of what the flow state is like and what it's all about, because anybody can get into it, but in very different ways. Each individual person has very unique way of getting into their own flow state, and that's what it's all about. That's what the life is all about finding your unique special way of getting things done and getting the joy out of life and getting happiness out of life. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.